Hi, it's me. Number 9. A legion lost in the desert sands for nearly 2,000 years has finally been found. A controversial new theory claims to have solved the mystery of what happened to the 9th and 11th legions after they vanished from history during the Roman Empire's invasion of Dacia. Renowned Roman expert puts forward some compelling arguments based on archaeological evidence that's recently come to light. But are we really talking about an entire lost army here? Let's look at the evidence. Be honest. The year is 106 AD. The Roman Emperor Trajan has just returned from his successful campaign to conquer Dacia, now known as Romania. To celebrate, he's commissioned 2 new legions to be raised in his honor, the 9th and 11th. These are special legions formed to commemorate the victory. They read not like the 40 or so others whose names and histories had become rather dull with age. The 9th and 11th legions are meant to be symbols of Rome's might and will be known forever for their role in bringing Dacia into the empire, or at least that was the plan. A couple of years later, these newly minted military units set out on their first assignment to put down a rebellion in the province of Pannonia, which today straddles the border between Austria and Hungary. And then they're gone. There's no record of them anywhere. After 117 AD, no written accounts, no coins, nothing. As far as anyone could tell until recently, they simply ceased to exist, leaving behind them only a lot of unanswered questions. One of those questions is why there are 2 missing legions. In those days, Rome's legions weren't numbered sequentially, but instead each one was named after its founding emperor. So if the 9th legion was the first raised under Trajan, then the 11th was the second, making them step-siblings, so to speak. They were part of the same batch, but separate entities nonetheless. Both disappeared at around the same time. But did they go missing together or separately? Is it a coincidence that 2 legions raised at the same time vanished without a trace? Or was there some connection between their disappearances? The accepted explanation for the 9th and 11th legions' sudden removal from history is that they were wiped out in the war against the Dacians, but no one knows exactly how this supposed defeat went down. Historian David Breeze suggested that both legions may have been destroyed at the same time at the Battle of Tapae, where Trajan himself almost died in a surprise attack by King Decebalus. However, Cassius Dio tells us that Trajan survived the battle and even went on to plunder the Dacian king's treasure. If the Romans took the king's treasure, then it seems unlikely that the legions would have all been defeated and killed. Another theory suggests that the 2 legions may have been decimated by disease. Considering that during those times, troops often lacked adequate clothing and were forced to march across Europe in the dead of winter. Whatever the case, the 9th and 11th legions were officially declared lost, with all their members presumed dead. Their campaigns were effectively over before they even began, at least that's the official story. But according to a new book called The Lost Legions of the Roman Empire, by military historian Ben Kane, the 9th and 11th never made it to Dacia at all. Instead, they were stationed along the Rhine River for most of Trajan's reign, and were never involved in any campaigns against the Dacians. Alessiers based on recent excavations at the site of the Roman fort of Nida, located in modern-day Germany. Archaeologists discovered pieces of pottery stamped with the name of the 9th Legion, along with an altar dedicated to Minerva, the goddess of wisdom, which contains the name of the 11th Legion. The artifacts date to around 114 AD, placing them firmly at the midpoint of Trajan's reign. If they were found at Nida, then it means that these 2 legions were in Germany, not Dacia. This isn't the first time that the fort at Nida has produced exciting discoveries. It was previously excavated in the 1930s and 40s, and a marble altar was found bearing an inscription that mentioned the 9th Legion. However, this altar turned out to be a fake. It was made by a German man who was obsessed with ancient Rome and buried at the site in order to make the fort more historically significant than it actually was. The recent discovery of the altar to Minerva makes it very clear that both the 9th and 11th legions were stationed at Nida at the same time. And since nobody had ever heard of the 11th Legion being there before, that raises some questions. How is it possible that these 2 legions were together in Germany, yet their presence was completely erased from historical records? Why would Rome lie about such a huge part of Trajan's reign? And what happened to the soldiers of the 9th and 11th after they left Nida? Did they get lost in the woods and die of exposure? Or were they betrayed by their commanders and sold into slavery? There are no answers to these questions right now, there's a chance that we may never know exactly what happened to the lost legions. The best that we can hope for is that archaeologists will uncover more artifacts that will shed light on their disappearance. But even that may not be enough to fully explain the situation. History. Sometimes the truth can be stranger than fiction. Just think about the fact that the 9th and 11th legions were essentially lost forever until a few years ago. Yet somehow they managed to leave behind physical evidence of their existence in Germany. It's as if they were trying to tell us that they were never in Dacia, even though everyone believed otherwise. It's not surprising that so many people became obsessed with solving the mystery of the lost legions. After all, what's more intriguing than a good old-fashioned whodunit? But maybe we should be asking the wrong question. Maybe instead of trying to figure out what happened to the legions, we should be asking why. Why would Rome raise 2 whole legions to commemorate a victory that they never won? Why would they send these elite fighting units on a mission where they would surely die? Why would they cover up the truth about what happened to them afterwards? The answer, of course, is power. Rome wasn't just trying to conquer Dacia. They were trying to reshape the entire known world. By the 2nd century, the Roman Empire was sprawling across 3 continents, stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. All that land needed to be defended, and defending it required a lot of soldiers. So Rome created more legions to keep their far-flung territories safe, but not all of them were made equal. The 9th and 11th legions were special because they were raised personally by Trajan. He handpicked the men who would join them and personally oversaw their training. These were his favorite legions, the ones that he would take with him on his most important campaigns. And if anyone tried to suggest that those legions didn't exist, well, let's just say that person wouldn't be alive for very long. So when Trajan decided to invade Dacia, he brought his best soldiers with him. Under his command, the 9th and 11th legions charged into battle, eager to prove themselves worthy of their emperor. But then something went wrong. Don't know what happened. But something must have gone terribly wrong for Trajan to have considered erasing the 9th and 11th legions from history. Perhaps they mutinied against him. Maybe they switched sides and joined the Dacians. Or maybe they simply lost the battle and were wiped out by the enemy. Whatever the case, it was a disaster. And if the truth got out, then the Roman Empire would look weak. Remember, this was back in the days when emperors could be assassinated by their own citizens for losing a battle. So in order to protect his legacy, Trajan ordered the legions to be disbanded. He gave their soldiers honorary discharges and sent them back home with promises of generous pensions. Then he wrote a new history, one that claimed the 9th and 11th legions had never existed at all. Of course, his plan worked for a while, but eventually people started asking questions. After all, if these legions were never real, then why were there so many veterans wandering around with military pensions? Why were there abandoned camps and weapons left behind in Germany? And why did Trajan build 2 monuments to the legions after his death? It was until the recent discovery of the altar to Minerva that the truth finally started to emerge. The 9th and 11th legions may have been lost for nearly 2,000 years, but now we know that they were real, and that's a pretty incredible discovery. What do you think? You think the 9th and 11th legions were lost in the desert sands of Dacia? Or were they stationed in Germany the whole time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to stay tuned for more videos about ancient civilizations. Thanks for watching. See you next time.